Madam Speaker, Singapore has been a one-party dominant state since independence. The ruling party has thus single-handedly shaped the political culture in Singapore. Our political culture is one that does not condone any allegations of wrongdoing or impropriety against the government of the day. Accusers are expected to back up their claims with evidence, and if they cannot, they are sued. Millions of dollars in damages have been awarded when unsubstantiated allegations amounting to defamation and slander have been made against politicians so as to preserve their moral authority. Many families have been besmirched by this. In fact, opposition politicians have been challenged to sue PAP MPs if they feel wronged. As recently as 2008, the late Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew himself said, and I quote, "I know the mentality of and the attitudes of the people in Singapore, and they know me by now that if anyone impugns the integrity of the government, of which I was the Prime Minister, I must sue, and I must demand that either the court finds that those defamatory words are true, in which case I am demolished, or there's a penalty." Unquote. The anomaly in this matter before the House today surrounds the decision taken by the Prime Minister, ironically it must be said, not to sue, in spite of the serious allegations of abuse of power, much to the surprise of many Singaporeans. Singaporeans have been sued for defamation for much less. One of the most famed examples being former Member of Parliament Mr. J.B. Jeyaretnam's utterance of the following at an election rally in 1997, where he said, and I quote, "Mr. Tan Liang Hong has just placed before me 2 reports he has made to the police against, Mr. Goh Chok Tong and his team," unquote. When it was suggested to the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew by a reporter that it was tenuous to base a defamation suit on Mr. Jeyaretnam, showing copies of Mr. Tang's police report to a rally crowd, Mr. Lee said that this was a matter for the courts to decide, and that his lawyers had advised him to sue. As for Mr. Jeyaretnam's offer to apologize without paying damages, the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was quoted as saying, I leave things to the lawyers, I have other things to do," unquote. In the normal course of events, the government would do precisely that, leave the matter to be settled by lawyers in court. Mr. Lee Hsien Loong and Ms. Lee Wei Ling would expect to face multiple defamation lawsuits for alleging that the Prime Minister has either lied or been corrupt in his dealings. As this has not happened, and in view of the political culture that I have spoken of, there are Singaporeans who believe that the allegations made against the Prime Minister may have more than a grain of truth to them. Many allegations have been made, and one only need to peruse the document made public by Mr. Lee Hsien Loong and Ms. Lee Wei Ling, released on the 14th of June 2017, titled, "What Has Happened to Lee Kuan Yew's Values," to remind themselves of them. I would expect the Prime Minister to make a compelling case today and when this debate closes. But until Mr. Lee Hsien Loong and Ms. Lee Wei Ling are fully heard, doubts will continue to linger, and this matter will not be put to rest unless a resolution is sought to the courts. Until that is done, who here would dare bet against a new Facebook post emerging from Mr. Lee Hsien Loong and Ms. Lee Wei Ling emerging tomorrow? The Prime Minister has to go to court to rebut these allegations of abuse of power in order to decisively settle the issue. In 1996, allegations were made against Mr. Lee Hsien Loong during the Hotel Properties Limited, or HPL saga. This episode erupted as a result of a public perception that both Mr. Lee Kuan Yew and Mr. Lee Hsien Loong had unfairly received discounts in the purchase of properties from the developer HPL. In that case, a parliamentary session, procedurally similar to the one we're having today in the House, was held to clear the air over the matter. However, the circumstances and facts of that episode and how it came to be debated in Parliament were diametrically different in a number of important ways. Firstly, a senior civil servant, the Deputy Managing Director of MAS, reported to the Finance Minister about HPL obtaining a waiver from the Singapore Stock Exchange from seeking shareholders' approval for the purchase of property by then Senior Minister Lee Kuan Yew. There was also market talk that Mr. Lee had been offered units in all the properties developed by the HPL Group. The Finance Minister duly reported this to the then Prime Minister, Mr. Goh Chok Tong, who ordered an investigation to get the Stock Exchange to provide a list of purchasers of 2 HPL developments, including questioning both the Senior Minister and then Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, who had also purchased 2 HPL apartments. In view of his investigation, Prime Minister Goh was convinced that there was no wrongdoing. Secondly, caveats were openly lodged giving the names of the Senior Minister and the discounted and the transacted prices after discount. This fact was crucial as a transparent caveat lodgement did not suggest any wrongdoing by any stretch. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew instructed Mr. Ong Beng Seng, the Managing Director of HPL and a key player in clearing the air, to confront the media about the propriety of the purchases by both himself and the DPM. Mr. Lee stressed to Mr. Ong that it was not enough for HPL to release a press statement, but that a press conference was in order. Contrast this important detail with the absence of any sense of closure on the allegations made by Mr. Lee Hsien Yang and Ms. Lee Wei Ling in the matter we are debating before the House today. Finally, during the HPL debate, sitting MPs, some of whom work for developers, were able to clarify the nature of how developers use complicated pricing strategies to market and sell their properties. The extent of probity and the affirmative conclusion to various matters in the HPL issue notwithstanding, by the time it came to an end in the House, MPs were in a position to triangulate various facts, which in totality made it absolutely clear that no improprieties could be alleged by any reasonable person in the purchase of apartments by the Senior Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. In the matter before us today, can we honestly say that we are apprised and fully aware of the evidence and facts relevant to the allegations of the Prime Minister abusing his power so as to come to the same conclusion? Frankly, by the end of today's debate, like the MPs in the House in 1996, if we can say yes, then there should be no lingering suspicions or doubts that the Prime Minister abused his powers in the matter of 38 Oxley Road. And that would be a welcome outcome for Singapore. However, in view of the highly unusual decision by the Prime Minister not to clear his name in the courts, the key question before this House is, how do we move forward from here? Parliament can be a platform to look into and address the matter, but the choice of the appropriate parliamentary forum is crucial. In fact, allegations of power by the Prime Minister may conceivably gain even more traction if the wrong parliamentary forum is chosen. In the event the Prime Minister eschews going to court to address these allegations of abuse of power, even as more allegations are made and left to the people's imagination to ruminate over, I am of the view that the next best option would be for Parliament to prepare to organize a special select committee to look into the allegations made against the Prime Minister. Its remit would simply be to look into the truthfulness of the allegations and get to the bottom of the matter. In light of evidence being made available to it, the committee can be expected to summon, if it so chooses, the Prime Minister, Madam Ho Ching, Mrs. Lee Swet Fen, and anyone else to shed light on the allegations. I make this proposal for a select committee of Parliament in the public interest as I believe it is an avenue to put a stop to these allegations, which have now moved beyond damaging just the government, but have damaged Singapore's reputation and the trust people outside Singapore have in its institutions. Many Singaporeans are unaware that the consequence of ignoring a summons from Parliament are severe, and a defaulter can be arrested and brought before the Select Committee to set the record straight. Should any witness be contemptuous before the committee, beyond hefty fines, Parliament is even empowered to commit that individual to prison for the rest of this parliamentary term. Madam Speaker, the longer this sad episode drags on, Singapore's reputation as a country where the rule of law is a strict guiding principle of our society and the credibility of government will be cast in very serious doubt. Like many Singaporeans, I agree that the matters surrounding the will and like disagreements are fundamentally family issues and should be privately resolved forthwith, either through the courts or through mediation. But it is the allegations of abuse of power that have to be decisively addressed. Otherwise, an odour will linger, one that will have severe and significant repercussions for Singapore's reputation. I do not believe a parliamentary debate like the one we're having today will put the matter to rest, even as I hope I am wrong. Thank you.